You've probably heard the term quality of life thrown around at least a couple times if you've modded games, read patch notes, or just talked about games before. If you're a little deeper into online gaming boards, you've probably even seen people arguing about quality of life changes in games, but despite the phrase being more common than ever, its definition remains as vague as can be. On the face of it, it seems easy to point out what quality of life means. It means something that improves your quality of life, basically self-explanatory, and how can anyone argue about improving your quality of life, especially in a game where the point is to have fun and enjoy yourself. So let's zoom out a bit and try to see what goes into a quality of life change for a game. As a baseline, quality of life changes do need to affect the gameplay in some way, even if it's not directly changing the mechanics of a game. If I fix some minor grammar in a paragraph, I think you'd be hard pressed to sell that as a quality of life update to any gaming audience, but if I added text saying what item you're currently using onto the screen, that could more easily be taken as quality of life. It similarly edits only text, but the text has much more gameplay relevance, reducing the need to remember specific icons to recall what an item is when you use it. There's a problem here though, and I'm sure some of you have already caught on to it. Isn't remembering things part of the difficulty of a game? Sure, the item menu of course can tell you what an item does, but isn't it part of the gameplay to recall what an item is in the heat of the moment when you can't pop open that item description? Even if you don't agree with this logic, or maybe not this logic in this specific situation, this is the crux of most arguments around quality of life. What counts is just quality of life and not dumbing down a game. Here's another example, this time from Monster Hunter. For those of you who haven't played Monster Hunter, the quick rundown is that it's an action RPG where you take on quests to hunt monsters. You slay the monsters and then carve them for materials, which are used for gear to hunt stronger monsters. It's a pretty simple gameplay loop, and we're looking at one specific part of it, the hunt itself. In older games, when you had to hunt a monster, you had to find it on the map first. You could do this in a couple of ways, by blindly checking every zone, using a Psycho Serum item, equipping an armor skill that lets you see it, having a cat partner see it, or waving at their scouting balloon. Once you find the monster, you can throw a paintball at it to keep it on your map. This is kind of like a tracking minigame before every hunt, a little build up before you get to the meat of the hunt where you and the monster beat each other up. But in the more modern games, specifically the latest one, you only need to press one button to find a monster. You mount up and that's it. Your mount will automatically track the monster for you, even navigating obstacles and letting you use items. And this seems like a pretty open and shut case of not quality of life, right? There's a whole system in the games before this where you had to track the monster and really hunt it down. While I haven't been fully truthful with how it worked in older games, there's a tiny issue with the tracking in them. Monsters always spawn in specific locations in every quest, meaning you never had to track or use anything I listed to find a monster. You don't even need to search this information up. Just by virtue of grinding a quest, engaging in the main gameplay loop, you'd probably at least instinctively remember where a monster spawns, and this fact creates a divide between people who knew this and ignore the tracking versus people who didn't know and engage in the tracking. To the people who ignored the tracking, hitting a button and going to the monster is purely quality of life. They weren't doing the tracking minigame anyways, and they were mentally autopiloting towards the monster every time they grinded a quest. To them, hitting a button and letting them tab out is just skipping the most boring and easy part of every quest. But to the people who didn't ignore the tracking, there's now seemingly a button that skips everything they were doing in every game before this one, and it came out of nowhere. This divide introduces a new dilemma into defining what quality of life counts as. The idea that your game could have two different audiences or more that view any feature as an annoyance or as something to be engaged with or worked around. You can see this in other games too, with systems that are more direct. In Dark Souls, one of the core mechanics of the older games was that if you were online and used a certain item to increase your max health, you could have another real player join your game with the intent to take you down, and losing to this other player counts as a real loss. It's as if you died to a normal enemy and you drop any souls you had, or lose them if you hadn't picked them up yet. In the newest game, Elden Ring, they made it so you can only get invaded if you either use an item to invite it, or if you're playing with another person already, likely in co-op. This is much more restrictive, meaning if you're an invader, you're either going to fair fights where someone is actively asking you to fight, or unfair fights where it's 2 against 1. But even this could be seen as quality of life to people who didn't like invasions in the first place. There's undoubtedly an audience of people who very vocally didn't like how invasions came as a consequence of using an item that wasn't explicitly asking for an invasion. In fact, the people using these items probably saw it as a kick while they were down because these are valuable items that you could waste if you used them and then were invaded and died, losing their effects. On the other side, invaders might think that this difficulty is an inherent part of the Dark Souls experience. It's enabled by default, and it's part of going through the world, possibly winning or losing against anyone who might show up. Now, in Elden Ring, if you don't want invaders, they never even have a chance of invading you unless you've got a friend with you. Quality of life, right? Their quality of life went up because now they don't need to go offline to avoid these people using the system they didn't like in the first place. When an audience is divided like this, changing a mechanic means picking sides, and the developers have to see what their vision is for a game to know what side to pick, and it's hard to measure whether the developers pick correctly, whatever that means. You can measure by player count or sales, and see if it went up up or down. But what if that's not what the developers wanted, just increasing player count? Of course developers want to be successful, but that could mean just having enough money to get by as if they had a more stable job. What if they were willing to take less money in exchange for making sure their idea of what the game should be got through more clearly? Then we can't measure by player count or sales, and we're back where we started, where quality of life can be defined by two different people completely differently, and they're both right. I don't really have a solution for this. How could I? How could anyone? It's like telling someone to get water that's both boiling hot and freezing cold. Someone could split the difference and give you 50 degrees Celsius water, but now nobody's happy. Rather than defining the word, I'm trying to spread the idea that the term quality of life is probably working against you if you want a change in a game. If the people you're talking to agree with you, calling it quality of life doesn't do much to sway them. They like the mechanical change regardless. If they don't agree with you, calling it quality of life doesn't do much for the same reason. They don't like the mechanical change. And people on the outside are now mentally primed to hear something that they can only interpret as a change that will increase their quality of life. But of course, they're all living their own lives playing these games, so they're primed to immediately agree or disagree just based on whether it makes their specific life more quality. It's almost like argumentative clickbait. It gets you to focus on a change being good or bad rather than any points being made, and the person making the argument can hand wave off any change as a quality of life change, so it must be good. Well, hopefully now you can see past this verbal trickery, whether it's someone else using it or you wanting to use it. Instead, think about the audiences. Why are they saying this is quality of life? Why are you calling it quality of life? And see or write or say what's actually being said, because ironically, the phrase quality of life is oversimplifying something, and I'm part of the audience that doesn't like that.